Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War news update for the 19th of January 2024, first part thereof. I was saying to JR yesterday in a video call with him, guy that helps me with the map, Jerome, he's a great guy, that he was like, yeah, it gets frustrating for you when you do these videos and you have to redo them for like the third or fourth time. I was like, I haven't done that in ages, actually. Next morning, 4 attempts at trying to, luckily it's only just the start of the video, 4 attempts at trying to just introduce the video. I'm like, this is a frontline update. No, it's not. This is blah, 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 blah. Anyway, here I am. Here is the news. We'll go to where we normally start. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can check out the caveats to this in the video description below. And we have very high numbers again today. Things are not looking good for the Russians on the front line in a number of places, it appears. At least as according to the Ukrainian general staff figures. 920 personnel lost is a high number, obviously very near to the 1,000, the magic 1,000, where, you know, we have seen it as high as 1,380, 1,300 on a number of occasions, but generally 1,000 is the upper end of the range. We're near that. 20 tanks is over the average. 35 armored personnel vehicles is almost double the average. 19 artillery systems is a loss, a big loss as well. So these are really heavy losses in those categories that show that the Russians are probably attacking, and they're also being degraded at a pretty unsustainable rate. 1 anti-aircraft warfare system also lost. 4 drones, that's not from last night before. Very quiet on the drone and missile front. Again, I think this is evidence that, and we'll talk about this in a second, that the Russians just do not have the drones and do not have the missiles that many claim they have. That the Russians claim that they have and are producing. 37 vehicles and fuel tanks is also a very high loss in that category, meaning the logistics capability of the Russians is going to be affected for special pieces of special equipment as well. So I think that is a bad day for the Russians, and it shows that the Ukrainians are still engaging in active defense or just good defense against the Russians, repelling the attacks Russians are throwing at them. When we look at Andrew Perpetua's list for the losses for the day before, we can see that there is a 3-to-1, maybe a little bit higher loss ratio of Russian to Ukrainian equipment. We have M777 for the Ukrainian there, a number of older howitzers, M113, APC, and some trucks. You know, that's really fairly low level equipment. M777 as a piece of artillery. Obviously, they don't like losing them, but all things considered, that's a fairly low loss level, especially when you compare it to what the Russians have lost again. So we have a command and control vehicle hit by Gimlers. So that shows you that that's a high value equipment if it's piece of equipment, if it's taken out by a HIMARS or similar. Mr. S piece of artillery, and then there's just a lot of IFVs and tanks, again showing that the Russians were probably on the attack in a number of places. This could be footage coming out from the columns of attacks towards Avdiivka a couple of days ago. We've got T90A. That's not the T90M, so it's not the most up-to-date version of the T90, but it is a T90 tank, so it is their newest tank. A couple of T72, a few T72s, T64s, and whatnot. Then we go on to BMPs, the infantry fighting vehicle, and again, it's interesting to note there's not a single BMP-1 on that list. These are all BMP-2s and BMP-3s. Again, suggesting that they just don't have the storage of easily fixable old BMP-1s. They're now having to fix them up in a more fundamental way, which means they're going to choose the newest variant to do that. And I think this again suggests that their stocks are dwindling, and at some point it's going to hit a critical level given the amount of vehicles that we are seeing lost on a daily basis. You know, you look at the general staff stats and you think, oh, is that high? Is that verifiable? Are we justified in believing these figures? And you look at Andrew Perpetua's list, which skews towards FPV drone or IED drone dropping, IED dropping drones. So these are skewed towards drone losses. And we've previously heard, as I keep saying, but I've got to keep saying this, 40% of the losses are drones, which means that 60% of losses are things like Gimlers, artillery, so on and so forth. So if almost all of the losses on here are from drone losses for both sides, then there will be an awful lot more equipment that is being taken out by artillery that you're not seeing on here. There's some Gimlers strikes, but generally there's a javelin there. There are no artillery hits for the Ukrainians here. And if you think in a single day of activity up and down the front line, you don't have something taken out by artillery, then that's highly unlikely. And so therefore, there's an awful lot more equipment to add to this list that simply isn't there. And then you look at this list and you say, well, are we therefore justified in believing these numbers? And the answer for me is yes, at least somewhat. I know I keep having to say the same thing, new viewers and all that, but there's a mantra in education that children forget 80% of what they're taught in 24 hours. So let's apply that to adults as well. Right, one of the strikes that's most worthy of note is this one that took place in Krinky, and this concerns, it appears, a household where a drone sort of team drone, basically the equivalent of Magyar, the really high value Russian drone operator. The Russian drone operator's team was found by Ukrainians in a house on the outskirts of Krinky. Russians boast that the team took down 500 Ukrainians. Whether you believe that or not is another thing. This is a video of their destruction and the face of them. So this is a drone team this guy, I think he's called Moses, and his team, he is supposedly like the Russian Magyar. This is really quite important. In fact, War Translated here says Ukrainian Defense Forces liquidated one of the most effective Russian FPV drone operators with the call sign Moses in Krinky, or Moisi. This was reported by several pro-Russian channels, referencing a message that appeared in Moses' channel posted by his wife. He was apparently the most successful FPV operator who destroyed, according to varying reports, between 400 and over 9,000 personnel and dozens of Ukrainian boats. His last message was from a few days ago. It's hell in Krinky. He was a receiver of many drone fundraiser campaigns. So several things to say here. If one of your main drone operators, who is equivalent to Magyar, is saying it's hell in Krinky, and he's a Russian, then it probably is hell in Krinky, right? I don't think anyone in their right minds would deny that. What the Russians are saying recently is that, and you look at Syriac maps, and I've shown this on my frontline updates, from their point of view, the Russians are squeezing the Ukrainians out, but there are some other claims that Ukrainians are expanding their bridgehead in Krinky. It is going to be super painful for the Ukrainians. There's no doubt about that. They are losing a number of boats. They're losing a lot of boats, and drones are having an effect in that area. But at the same time, the Russians are taking quite some serious losses in that area. And again, look to the evidence that Andrew Perpetua is showing you there. And on his original, actual original tweet, you'll see that the Google Docs document is always linked, and that link will also give you the source video for each of the claims. So this is all, completely verifiable. These are completely verifiable loss stats, and many of them are coming from Krinky. Krinky is very problematic for the Ukrainians. Let's have a look at the Russian claims. So the enemy has been happily yapping since the morning that one of our most effective FPV operators, who was responsible for more than 50 boats and almost 400 enemy soldiers and officers, was allegedly killed in Krinky. Balu, a Ukrainian FPV ace who spent a week at a well-known facility and for whom they asked for at least one UMK aviation bomb, 250 or 500, but never got them, is very happy. In other words, the Russians were asking for him to be hit that's the Ukrainian, to be hit by the FAB 500. Bad news: the most successful operator of UAV bombers with the call sign Moses died in Krinky. On his account, just think about it, 31 sunk boats of the Ukrainian armed forces and 498 destroyed enemy soldiers. I knew this hero personally. His wife reported his death on the Moses channel. Moses' last post was is hell in Krinky. So yeah, that's good news for the Ukrainians there. Now, more details about the A50, AWACS, IL-22 and friendly fire. Again, this debate is still raging on. This is from a Russian post that was doing the rounds. What's interesting about this is not so much how it got taken down, but the number of very high level personnel on board. So I had the opportunity to chat with my friends from the VKS, the Russian Air Force. The story about the defeat of our own air defense continues to spread actively among the military. Moreover, it has already been determined who exactly will take responsibility for the destroyed A-50. I promise not to specify the VH. I can only say that, according to legend, the AWACS was shot down from the territory of the Krasnodar territory. Okay, so again, story, legend. We don't know if this is just an account that's going around the Russians, or whether they actually genuinely believe this is true, and this is true. New instructions have been issued according to which air defense units will be individually informed in case of operation of AWACS aircraft in the area of responsibility. Well, interestingly, the AWACS is out again. So one was shot down, but another, Russia's A-50, has appeared around occupied Ukraine. The new beast was spotted over the Sea of Azov, according to head of Air Force Yuri Ignat. So that's again the same place that the last one was shot down. As you know, no one believed in the accident and unfortunate combination of circumstances. I am publishing a list of servicemen who were on board the AWACS A-50 who are currently considered missing. So there's a lieutenant colonel, who was commander of the ship, navigator, who's a major, a captain, a senior lieutenant, and the list is incomplete. Also, sources report that Colonel Burmistrov was killed on board the Il-22. So the idea that the Il-22 came out, just with a tiny bit of cosmetic damage, as some of the Russians are kind of saying, and that there's no evidence of this and that, and actually, a colonel appears to have died on board. Regarding the rumours about the president of Lieutenant Colonel Chayla, he's guy that I reported on board the AWACS, there is no information. So again, another very high ranked officer that I reported yesterday had perished could be added to that list as well. So anyway, this AWACS is now a new AWACS, or another AWACS is. Sorry, not AWACS, A-50, the equivalent, is hanging around the Sea of Azov. Now, that's interesting because if the Russians were genuinely scared of a Patriot system working in the area that took down the A-50, then it would be unlikely that they're operating another one, unless two things. One, in the Sea of Azov is much further to the south and not getting so riskily close to, say, Berdyansk as the other one was. Or that it was indeed shot down by their own air defences, and now they know what happened. They have more confidence to operate in the area, knowing, or at least hoping, that it won't happen again because the air defence has been sort of given more information or tasked with proper protocol or whatever it is. So you can interpret that in several ways. Right, moving on to strikes and whatnot. I don't know of any large-scale strikes into Ukraine last night. There's no information I have. There might be the odd missile, the odd drone. But again, this goes back to the idea that they are firing them at the rate that they produce them, and they aren't producing them at huge rates. Now, there are claims that they've upped the production of missiles to rates that are higher than prior to the war. That may be, but we're just not seeing many of them being launched. In fact, it's worse than that for the Russians. So now there are claims maybe Russia didn't launch its revenge attack, and this is what I said, and Tim White's saying it, because they really have almost run out of rockets until Iran, North Korea give another terrorist presence. But Putin's war criminals, he says, were reduced to firing 60-year-old missiles. So this is the claim that... and John Ridge says here, it would appear that per Defense Express, Russia has employed a P-35 SSN-3B Sepal supersonic anti-ship missile against Ukraine for the first time. The P-35 is one of the oldest Soviet anti-ship missiles remaining in Russian service, originally fielded in 1962. So they are using these very big, very old anti-ship missiles, and that has been evidenced. There's imagery to support that claim. Then the question is, why are Russia using a missile like that? Why would you go back to, it's like the US going to war now, right? Again, and saying, no, we're not going to use all the best stuff now. Have we got something from 1962? Have we got that? Yeah, we have. Why do we want to use that? I mean, we've got a load of stuff that will definitely hit the target and do a much better job. Yeah, I don't know. It just I feel nostalgic. I like Buddy Holly. Yeah? I like the Beatles, yeah? Or how about an old anti-ship missile from the 60s as well? We can play the music and send a missile. Are you feeling all right? What could explain the data? And the most plausible explanation of this data is that the Russians are running low on missiles. And it fits in with exactly what I have been saying. It's a rare 4-ton anti-ship missile. First known case of its use, been in service since 1962, and used either from the coastal Redut missile system or from an underground Objekt 100 missile system. The missiles are hidden underground and are raised only before launch, says Nexter. I don't know. Let me know what you think. On the other hand, this is annoyingly, there's just contradictory data. Or actually, I don't know that this is contradictory. the missiles that they are producing now, and they appear to be firing. So they appear to be firing when they are shooting these cruise missiles into Ukraine. They appear to be ones that have just recently been made. So again, actually, that does support the thesis I've just been discussing. But the Russian X-101 or KH-101 missiles differ from those used in 2022. They now feature, so these are 2023 versions that now feature radio electronic warfare system, active defense, and heat trap. So we've seen them send off flares or chaff or whatever it is as they go through the air on at least one occasion. So they are using more, recently constructed missiles. And also, they are adapting the missiles to do a better job. Now, there's some claims that their missiles are pretty inaccurate. So, whether they're able to get the very best components to use these to fire from these to construct these missiles, I don't know. But they are building them with other bells and whistles on them, and that's according to the speaker of Ukrainian intelligence. Right, Belgorod was lighting up. I don't know what went on there, whether there's some substation going up or whether this was, either or it could be both and, right? Either or both and. A substation on fire or the Ukrainians striking a Belgorod substation. It certainly looks like some kind of electrical explosion or fire going on there. Anyway, Belgorod, something happened. Then this has been doing the rounds this morning. This is an oil depot that has been hit. Significant burning taking place in Bryansk. That's north of Ukraine. You've got Bryansk and Belgorod north of Ukraine that often see activity. This is the claim from the local governor is that it's under control. This is an oil depot being hit. We are seeing a number of these oil depots get targeted. One was targeted night before in St. Petersburg. We'll come to that in a second. Overnight, Ukrainian drones hit an oil depot in Bryansk region. In Russia, there is a big fire and several oil tanks have been affected. Okay, so as well as that, there is an unknown drone that flew into the Tambov powder. This is a gunpowder factory today and exploded near the workshop. There are no losses of humans, I believe. Tambov is 400 kilometers from Ukraine. This is pretty significant there. So quite an explosion to that gunpowder factory. Again, Ukraine hitting Russians in their logistics and defense military industrial capacity. Going back to 2 nights ago when St. Petersburg was hit, the Leningrad region was targeted. Quote, the drones that were used to attack the oil depot in the Leningrad region in Russia were Ukrainian made. They hit a target and flew exactly 1,250 kilometers that night, says the Minister of Strategic Industries of Ukraine, Alexander Kamyshin. So top knot, man. This is important. So one, they can fly 1,250 kilometers. Right. That's a massive range for a drone. So that's a first thing that is super, super significant. 2, it's flown that far without being taken out. 3, the claim is it hit its target. All of that looks very, very good for Ukraine and very bad for Russia. To have such a long-range drone not be taken out of the sky. Did it hit the target? I don't know. He's claiming it did. Did it hit the target? I don't know. But if it was taken out of the sky by air defense, then it got all that way to St. Petersburg before being taken out by air defense. So even that is worrying for the Russians. Anyway, really good news for the Ukrainians and their indigenous industries for creating things like drones and other munitions. So moving on to other bits and pieces, we'll go through again the issues Russia is having. Crimea, Sevastopol went underwater, so there's big flooding in Sevastopol. That's not looking good. So yeah, can't really see too much in that one. There you go, a bit better. So that is, a bit of a challenge for Crimea. I don't know if that's snow melt off, whether they've got severe rains, whether that's coming from water supplies as well. I don't know. All the above. could be taking place. And then you have, Russia is freezing. Residents of Novosibirsk are becoming very angry now at the constantly missed deadlines of when heat will return. There have been 2 major incidents in the city in a week, and neither has been repaired, despite 100% assurances that heat would be switched back on. This is really obviously annoying and dangerous for the civilians of, in this case, Novosibirsk. You've got Simferopol, Feodosia, Kerch, Saki, Sevastopol, Jankoy without power, it appears still, and that is a huge challenge for the Russians again. Sorry, I had to answer all that. So there we have some issues in Crimea, but this time not flooding. It's a lack of energy. Now, Russia has solved the problem with bad roads and emergency areas. While all the money is spent on seizing Ukrainian territories and no one is repairing or building roads, the authorities of the Surgut region turned to the local animator. He expelled evil spirits, whispered the most critical areas, and performed a ritual against the appearance of potholes on the road. So this is a level 12 mage throwing holy water liberally everywhere. And I believe evidence suggests that this is the most effective way to sort out logistics that have been poorly funded. I'm fairly sure there's some good scientific evidence to suggest that effectiveness. Now, why I mention all that, I just want to show you some projections. So projection psychologically is when you project issues you have onto other people and say they have them. That's sort of one kind of manifestation. So the Russians are really good at doing this. And we often talk about the Russian projection, saying, and this happens with, you guys are torturing, this, and the Ukrainians are torturing soldiers after trying to cover up a massive torture thing themselves, or Ukrainians have done this and it's the Russians have done this. Well, here, Russian propagandist Skabieva makes fun of the cold temperatures in the United States while hundreds of thousands of Russians actually freeze. I mean, it's just insane. This is brilliantly terrible. So anyway, she says, and I will read it to you, it's only 40 seconds. So 14 people fell victims of the abnormally cold temperatures in America. The Independent informs that in the north of the country, the temperature dropped below minus 20 degrees Celsius. For them, it's already abnormal. So people are freezing to death right on the streets. Today, the cold front will reach the southern states. In Oregon, 60,000 people are already left without electricity. The weather caused a transportation collapse. Over 10,000 flights got cancelled. Really? Meanwhile, in Moscow, at the beginning of January, remember, it was around minus 30 degrees Celsius. In Oymyakon, right now, it's minus 55 degrees, and everything seems to be okay. Just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, really? Anyway, everything's okay. Flights aren't getting cancelled, etc., etc. And yet, we have seen a week, and I've reported that to you. And it's just fascinating when you start joining this stuff up and then seeing what the Russian narrative that they are presenting is. And it's just laughable. It's laughable. At the same time, about 1,500 here, maybe 2,000 in other sources, have gathered in the Russian Ufa, which is capital of Bashkortostan. So remember, there's this guy who was protesting against a gold mine and was arrested for extremism, and loads of people came out against it. I think it's also to do with, and we'll come on to this, to do with an expression of their own ethnic identity as well in the area. I think there have been some legislation against that or some issues with that. So there's a lot of stuff boiling up under the surface here. Anyway, they gathered for a demonstration today. Law enforcers started arresting people. Hundreds of people have started coming to Salavat Yulev Square in Ufa in the morning of January 19th. They explained their presence in the city by the desire to see their people and lay flowers at the monument of the national hero of Bashkortostan. Special police forces and security forces in plain clothes arrived at the site and almost immediately started detentions. By noon, Ufa time, about 1,500 people had gathered in the square in the center of Ufa, where a demonstration in support of activist Fail Alsniov who had been sentenced to 4 years in prison, had been held. Sot Avision reported from the scene. Russian National Guard and riot police were gathered around the square. Men in civilian clothes with masks on their faces were on duty along the perimeter, and several police buses were involved. Mobile communication and internet disruptions were observed. According to preliminary data, law enforcers detained a total of 7 people in the square. Other protesters tried to prevent the departure of the bus with them, but the riot police pushed them back. Protesters chanted shame. Closer to 1 p.m, special police force arrived to help out the law enforcers. Ufa residents began to disperse along the city streets, but the security forces rushed to pursue and detain them, local media reported. So this is, again, unhappiness going on in Bashkortostan. What I was talking about yesterday concerning this is you want this kind of discontent to spread, and you want there to be this sense among other people that they have a permission to be angry with the Russian government, with Russian police, etc., etc. You want this kind of discontent, and I think there was an outpouring. I was looking on, I don't know if it's here, no, on another source that actually there were people sort of doing ethnic sort of dances, traditional dances of the area, and so on and so forth. Now that I actually is not the time to speak about this next piece. I think it's better to mention this, because I think it fits perfectly with what I've just said. So Deputy Speaker of the Russian State Duma, Petr Tolstoy, has called for the liquidation of all national communities in Russia. This is what freedom looks like. Hey, this is what freedom looks like in Russia. Boom! Let's liquidate all ethnic identities. Let's just conform you all to one idea of what a Russian is. Yeah. Oh, liberty? No, we don't do liberty. No, none of that. None of that here. Everyone's the same. Quote, all these national diasporas, compatriots and communities are nothing but legalized mafia structures. It is time to finish with inter-ethnic liberalism. Imagine saying that in the US. Imagine saying that in the UK. Imagine a politician coming out and saying, enough with all this inter-ethnic interaction. You're nothing but mafia. Yeah. You community from Nepal in Aldershot, you're mafia, you are. And Islamic communities around the UK, mafia. And African communities and Nigerian communities in London, mafia. We're going to get rid of all of this. You're all going to be one. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Suppressing ethnic minorities a worrying sign. Looks like the Kremlin regime aims to clear out any and all structures that could have the slightest possibilities of becoming a threat. They have learned the Wagner lesson. Goodness gracious me. Now, to add on to this, as Jimmy Russian says, even I'm sometimes amazed how nakedly fascist Russia has become and how they readily admit it. So this is now Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, saying, quote, the special military operation has allowed Russia to purify itself of people who didn't feel a belonging to Russian history and culture. What I get from that is, like, we are able to throw any dissenters and any people who sit outside what our idea of Russian history and culture is, throw them into the front line and get them killed. And that is allowing us to purify our country back in Russia. At the same time, it's trying to purify Ukraine. Just like, I am going to be simplistic again. I keep saying this, but who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? The bad guys are definitely Russia. I know someone said yesterday, I feel uncomfortable with you calling the Ukrainians good guys, it's too simplistic. But really, in relative terms, I think it's pretty damned obvious. Like, you don't see any of this rhetoric from Ukrainian politicians. Because they start losing their funding and their support like that. Russia can get away with saying the most despicable things. Right, we're going to go back to this idea that, the planes are all, failing to fly in the US and it's a complete disaster, blah, blah, blah. Russian pilots complain en masse about low-quality landing strips. 4 airplanes have rolled off the runways in a month. Russian Telegram channels report airplanes in Russia have begun to roll off the runway systematically, and pilots are complaining en masse about the unsatisfactory condition of the airfields and airports. The latest incident occurred earlier this week. The Tu-204 with 17 tons of Russian post parcels and cargo was caught on video wheeling out of a runway at Mirny in Yakutia. According to the Aviaturshchina Telegram channel, the traction coefficient barely met the minimum allowed, 0.3. Don't know what that means, but apparently it's bad. Mass complaints about their landing strips poured in from Aeroflot pilots. The company has registered an increase in the number of reports from pilots about unsatisfactory airfield conditions, which can lead to rolling out the airfield and damage to airplanes. A list of problem airports has already been compiled. Pilots should be careful when landing in Khabarovsk, Ufa, Khanty-Mansiysk, and Chelyabinsk. There have been at least 4 more cases of airplanes rolling off the runways over the past month. On January the 12th, an Arctic Airlines Yak-42 passenger plane rolled off the runway at Arkhangelsk Airport and temporarily paralysed its operation. In Norilsk on the 9th, a Boeing 737-800 of Nordstar Airlines rolled out in the landing area. It was on a flight from Krasnoyarsk with 169 passengers on board. Another incident occurred on the 15th at Osura Airport in Kamchatka. Yak-40 airplane with 6 people on board rolled out the runway, the Far Eastern Transport Prosecutor's Office reported. So, again, huge issues here. As of January the 14th, 3 accidents in 6 hours. Russian airlines break new records. So things are not looking good, and yet the Russians have the gall on national TV to make the claims they do. It's, as I say, laughable. Then we're going to return to Scott Ritter, who's giving a present to Solovyov. I've said this before when he gave a gift to Ramzan Kadyrov, who's a Chechen warlord. Any human being on my threads that suggests I ever listen to Scott Ritter again can take a long walk off a short pier. We should deliver everything America's enemies need to all of them. Any weapons that they need. Supply any weapons to North Korea, Syria, or anyone else needs. This is what Solovyov has said, right? So he hates America. And he's an overt propagandist that says the most despicable things. Scott Ritter goes on TV with him. Oh, ha ha ha, laughy laughy, fun times in interview, and then gives him a gift. It's pretty despicable. Right, breaking news from yesterday. Ukrainian hackers stole technical documentation for 500 objects of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. Hackers from the Blackjack Group who are probably related to the SBU, hacked a Russian state-owned enterprise that builds military facilities throughout the Russian Federation. Ukrainian cyber warriors downloaded more than 1.2 terabytes of data of the main military construction directorate for special objects. Oof. This attention is more than 500 technical passports of military facilities in the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, weapons arsenals, anti-aircraft missile sites, headquarters, barracks, including locations of the enemy-occupied territories of Ukraine and other technical and project documentation. Hackers have demolished 7 servers and encrypted more than 150 computers. Ouch, of the institution's employees. In fact, Russian special construction companies were left without the entire array of data and backup copies of information. That is massive, right? The Ukrainian GUR has now acknowledged the hack and informed that it will help planning future attacks in Russia. You're damn straight that's going to help, I'm pretty sure. This is huge, and in fact the Ukrainian hackers have been really successful over the last few weeks, ever since the Kyivstar hack, which I think itself was a retaliation to a hack that the Ukrainians had done successfully just before. So that Kyivstar hack was a success for the Russians, and indeed the parent company has admitted that they lost nearly $100 million as a result of that. So VEON, the Dutch telecommunications operator and parent company of Ukrainian mobile operator Kyivstar, revealed a 3.1 billion hryvnias, or $95 million revenue loss to the major cyber attack conducted by a Russian hacker group in December. The company announced on the 18th, so yesterday. So that is bad news for the Ukrainians there. But good news is the Ukrainians are doing some super successful hacking of the Russians. We've seen pensions being hit by hacking, or the pensions authorities. We've seen a number of different institutions, and now this one, which I think sounds like it's a really meaningful hack there. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Really appreciate all your support. I've booked my flights to Ukraine, so that's all good news. It's all moving along. I'm excited and nervous about that. I hope it's the right decision, and I hope I can in some way communicate things effectively and be of some use and matter rather than just being out there for my own benefit in some way. That's not what it's about. Although I might be like excited, but it's going somewhere different. There are risks involved. I don't want this to be. I don't want to be a burden on anyone. So I hope that there is a real net gain for humanity. Like, that sounds really grandiose, but in some way, hopefully there's some use in me going. Anyway, I'll get on and continue doing the organisation for that. But in the meantime, I'll get out my second video as soon as I can. Toodle pips.